name is Darrell Robert Schoon, and I have the distinct pleasure to be here with Reverend Betty Tatalajski, the founder of the Temple of Universality. Now, I asked Betty, what are we going to talk about today? And Betty looked at me and says, well, I'm going to talk about a friend of mine, a friend.
A friend.
A friend. All I can say, though, is when you ask Betty, and Betty says she's going to talk about a friend, there's no way to know exactly what she's going to say. And so without further ado, Reverend Betty Tatalajski, founder of the Temple of Universality here in Tucson, she's going to talk us and tell us about one of her friends.
One of my friends. Yes, I will. And it's always good to be with you, friends. It's always lovely to talk about the temple and to be with you. And we always appreciate some of you who tune into the show and then come and see us at the temple. We're delighted at that. And you know, I usually am talking about one of the tenets of the temple. We have 10 tenets. One is, of course, there is no death. There is only continuous life. And another is spiritual healing is certainly valid and real and facilitated by the Holy Spirit. So those are the two I thought I would talk about tonight or today in regard to my dear friend Howard. I would give you his last name, as some of you will know him after this talk, but he was a Leo and a very wonderful, wonderful friend. His language was mostly in four-letter words. He was a very colorful speaker and a dear, dear friend. And a lot of people didn't know the heart that he had because they couldn't get past the colorful vocabulary. But I did, and I was so much richer for it, along with my sister Nora, Reverend Nora Allen. Very dear, dear person. Now, since he's having a birthday soon, I always celebrate that. He's been in spirit, in the spirit side for quite a while now, but he's just as alive to me as he ever was. And I look forward to talking to him, and you can meet him on a Friday night in the Seance Circle. Now, my friend Howard had a condition that was quite severe, actually. He had a brain cancer, he had lung cancer, and he had cancer of the kidneys. Now, his wife called from Phoenix and said, Betty and Nora, you know, you're such the closest friends that Howard has, and we'd known him so long. Would you come and see him? He's in the hospital, and he has these 3 different types of cancer. So, but don't let him know that I ask you. Well, the next day we just happened to be going to the airport, take a friend, and so we went and well, he was in the hospital, so we went to the hospital, and he was up and down in the aisles talking, you know, the halls, talking to folks and pushing some kind of a gadget with some liquid, you know.
We've seen him.
Yeah, something. But, you know, he saw us and he was delighted as we were. He had no pain. And I talked to we had a great time, and I talked to the doctor, and he said, your friend he said, there's something wrong with him. I said, yeah, he's got cancer in 3 different parts of his body, and they say they're different cancers. He says, yes, I'm one of his doctors. He said, yes, he does. He said, because, I mean, we've all seen the x-rays, everything. He has cancer here, here, and here, you know. And he says, and he's just the life of the party. He has no pain at all. And I said, well, that's good. So shortly, we went home, and Howard went home himself. And my sister and I took my inner vision class my metaphysics class to Camp Chesterfield, Indiana, for our yearly vacation there. I did this for 28 years because I wanted my students to experience. I now say, don't believe a word I'm saying, although I can swear to you it's true. But I do invite you to have the experience because my experience is my truth. It would only be a belief or disbelief to you, and that's of no account at all. So for 28 years, I took my students to camp, as I've said before, so that they could meet directly and often face-to-face with that band of teachers that comes in with everyone.
Now, what I want to say here, when she says going back to camp, this is what she means. In 1979, Betty was living up in the foothills, swimming pool, house, kids, dogs, the whole kit and caboodle. And she, as she said, she sort of stumbled into Wonderland. And
Yes.
she wasn't looking for it,
No.
except in a soulful way. And she didn't know that.
No.
Didn't know that. And she came into a spiritualist church here in Tucson. And Betty had no idea about this type of phenomena when spirits
Never
come and talk.
heard of it.
Never heard of it. If she'd been told about it, she'd have the same kind of skepticism that anybody would have about some phenomena like that.
But mine, I just walked into it unknowingly.
Yes. And she was told, she was in this spiritualist church, they talked to spirit, all right? And Betty was told, she was teaching this course in the Course in Miracles at the time, and they told Betty to take her whole class, the ones who wanted to go, back to this Camp Chesterfield, which is what she's talking about,
Yes.
in Indiana. Now, Betty didn't know what Camp Chesterfield was, and she found out it was a spiritualist community that had been over there well over 100 years, from the 1800s, and they had mediums, trance mediums, phenomena mediums. I mean, the kind of stuff that you hear about maybe in some arcane thing about spiritualists who talk to spirits and stuff like that. And she went. And this is what it is. Betty encountered the highest level of spiritual phenomena that you can on this planet. She took that class back to Camp Chesterfield for 28 years. 28 years from Tucson. And the ones who were lucky enough to go to Betty's inner vision class and went back there experienced something truly, truly extraordinary. So that's what Betty's talking about when she was at Camp Chesterfield.
Yes. Sometimes I sort of just skip right over it.
It's normal to you.
I assume that since I live in Wonderland, everybody else does too. So, my friend Howard had not been to camp, but he had been to the Spiritualist church with me, of course, and he knew, of the phenomena. He knew of the cards, the silks, the speaking directly to spirit through a trumpet, a raised megaphone, as it were. He knew all of this, and he got it secondhand, and he appreciated it. It wasn't his cup of tea.
That's
okay?
right. He just had some crazy friends.
Oh yeah, they had crazy friends, and we all loved each other dearly. And so I go to camp, and I, with my students, and have a wonderful time, of course. And I will add that in some of the classes, my students got to stand up and face individually their own doctor teacher. Now, since everybody comes into life with a band of teachers, nobody is left out, okay? It's just that most of us haven't awakened. Most of us have never even been told that there is such a thing. But nobody comes into life alone. I don't care how you were conceived or where you were born.
Or how alone they think they are.
Or how alone.
Yeah.
Who knew, okay?
Yeah.
And so I wanted them to know it because since everyone comes into life with a purpose, you don't get your visa to Earth plane from the karmic board without a purpose. You have to sort of like write your plan. Why are you going? You know, there's a long line of folks that want to go. And so you come with your purpose, you come through the birth canal, you have cosmic amnesia, and a lot of people continue in that cosmic amnesic state.
Until they go back.
Until they go back and say, oh, wow.
Yeah, right.
Oh, why didn't somebody tell me? Now, people like myself have been telling you all the time, but who knew?
That's right.
Nobody's going to believe that ditzy blonde, that's for sure. But you know what, friends? My friend Howard did. It just wasn't his thing.
Okay.
He had another life. So I'm having a wonderful time, you know. I'm meeting Dr. Carter, who standing right here. And I met him in a materialization session where he created himself here and gave me a hug, okay? And all the students, that's 15 students, each had their doctor-teacher materialize likewise, okay? And I had the silks and the cards and all. And at the end of this time to come home, I said, well, you know, they said, now, Betty, you've talked to your band and so forth. I said, well, I didn't talk to St. Teresa. St. Teresa of Lisieux was a saint that I had heard of when I was a Catholic, you know. But I didn't know that she was also a Carmelite sister of mine. As she said, Betty, you and I switch roles, and we're always this close. She said, now this time I stand beside you, and sometimes you're here and you stand beside me. Well, who knew? I told her I would have appreciated it had I known. And she says, oh, you've cried on my shoulder so many times. I said, well, why didn't you yell in my ear then? You know, I could have been a lot happier. She said, no, that's one thing, free will. Nobody can push, urge another. We are not here to convict anybody, you know, or convince.
Yep.
It is a free will.
Free will.
God himself will not interrupt your free will. So
And that's why everybody's trying to take it away from each other.
yes, God will not. He will not usurp your free will. So anyway, Howard knew what we did, and he loved and supported us.
But Howard never went back to...
He never went back.
Never went back to Camp Chesterfield.
He did go to Dr. Robert Ireland's church.
Okay.
He did see Blindfold Bill.
Okay, so he saw the phenomena.
He did see that.
All right.
And so he just took for granted the rest of it was
true, yeah.
Well, anyway, the end of the week, and I've had a wonderful time, and they said, you've talked to all your teachers? I said, no, I didn't talk to my sister Teresa. And they said, well, she's in Tucson, no, she's in Phoenix with your friend Howard. Your friend Howard has severe cancer. And I said, well, yes. And they said, well, he's in severe pain also, except he doesn't feel it because your Carmelite sisters stand around his bed and are removing the pain, and he doesn't feel any of it. Now, they said Howard is dying, but you think because he's your friend, he knows how to go to the light, but he doesn't. So, Betty, now, when you go back, would you call Howard and tell him to go to the light? Now, I am getting St. Teresa of Lisieux and her Carmelite people are working. My doctor teachers and St. Germain are telling me to call Howard and tell him go to the light. Well, when I left him, he had his body riddled with cancer, but he wasn't in pain.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that.
You didn't want to tell him.
I didn't want to tell him that.
Hey, Howard.
No.
Time's up. Go to the light.
No, I could not do that. Now, you might do it. You might do it, but honey, I couldn't do it.
All right.
So, on the plane home, I've negotiated with my band of teachers.
That's right.
You know. I said, okay, here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
Now, I will call Howard. I mean, how do I know what day and time? How do I know he's not out playing golf or something, you know? And I said, let's put it this way. Now, I will call, and if he answers, I will tell him. But please do not let him answer.
That's because you don't want to tell him.
Don't let him answer unless it is
The time.
exactly the time.
Okay.
So I wasn't comfortable with it, but I did promise heaven I would do it. So I come home and about a week, and I make the call. No answer.
Oh, that's right.
Hey, this is good.
This is good. You can keep doing this.
I did it 3 times.
Okay.
In a month. Okay, 3 times.
So every once in a while you would just call.
I would call.
And what happened? No answer.
No answer. Okay, all righty.
Life is good.
So life is good, and so I'm feeling good.
Yes,
and then I get a call from his wife.
Okay.
And she says, Betty, could you and Nora come and see Howard? And please don't tell him that I have called
Okay.
you.
All right.
And I said, well, as a matter of fact, that same coincidence, we're coming to Phoenix
Okay.
tomorrow
All right.
to take Gary back to the airport.
All right.
So we go and knock on the door. This man comes to the door that I never in my life would have recognized. Now, my sister not only is a minister and a nurse, but she knew exactly what it was. I would not have known him. He was 2 or 3 times as big as he had been, okay? He was just puffed. Some of you have seen this, I had not. So he was, he did not want to see us, we
Sure,
know.
sure.
And you do not.
Yeah, of course.
And so we just ignored that and said we were just coming
Yeah, we were by.
from
Yeah.
the airport.
Yeah.
So, of course, he invited us in. He and his wife and Nora and I were sitting at the table. And I said, well, what you been doing? Well, I just been to camp. Oh, well, tell me what happened. You know? So I had my silks
Yeah, showed
with
him.
all the pictures
Yeah.
on.
Should we show?
I had,
Should we show one of these?
yeah, let's show one
Let's
of the
show you.
cards.
This is what happened. This is what is part of spiritual phenomena, folks. This is a beautiful, beautiful. This is
Our Lady of the Sea from that is the Blessed Mother's name, of course, in Haifa, at that particular church, Our Lady of the Sea.
okay. Now that's
one of her 21 names.
okay. Now, what you just saw was a beautiful picture. All right. Spiritualists, the mediums, the top mediums, are able to what they call precipitate these out in these cards. They don't do it, Spirit does. They're in a basket, a basket with no light can get into it, all right? And as you're sitting in the room, you see all these cards are blank on both sides, nothing on them at all. With those blank cards, they scatter some pens, pencils, colors, things like that, and they put the lid on it. And it sits there as you sit there. And around 45 minutes, hour later, they take them off, and you saw one of those cards. Betty has seen these things for 33 years. I saw my first card in 2006, and we have a lot of these cards after then. They're extraordinary. They're these kind of things that sort of punch through your veil of skepticism, because you can own what we believe is based upon our experience and spiritualism, and the idea that you don't die, that you're on the stage and you're off the stage. But when you're on the stage, those off the stage, you can communicate with them. They're just off the stage. All right? It's like telling somebody 200 years ago, oh, I can call somebody on another continent. And they'd look at you and go, you're a fool.
Right.
Don't, lie to me.
Right.
Or if somebody told somebody 2,000 years ago in Europe that in China, they keep warm by burning black rocks. And they would have thought, you're crazy. Because the Chinese had coal.
That's right.
So, and this is understandable that you wouldn't believe it. But I want to say one thing. This person next to me has steeped in this stuff longer than anybody I know. And that's one of the reasons I like hanging out with her and asking these kind of questions. Because the only way you're going to know what you don't know is to hear from somebody who knows something you don't know.
And who will take you for the experience. Bring you for the experience.
Yes.
Now, on the back of those cards, first is your name and all of the people who have signed your card.
Yes. Yes.
Whom you thought were dead.
We're dead. So you're at Howard's house.
We're sitting at
He's
the
an
table.
extremist.
And,
All right.
Yes, and now he is in no pain.
No pain.
But he can't maneuver.
Okay.
His feet are like round,
Yeah.
and he can't
Swollen
he can hardly
up.
walk. So, tell me about camp. So I showed
Yeah.
him the cards.
Yeah.
And we showed him the silks with the precipitated faces, and we told him, what the message is that Spirit had given us and what we were doing.
But you hadn't told him, Howard, go
Go to the light.
to the light.
Couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. You're having you go through the salad course, the soup course, and you're thinking, I'm supposed to tell him, go to the light. You hit the entree, the dessert's coming.
We're having a lovely time.
Lovely
and
time.
He's enjoying it
Yeah.
as much as if
Yeah.
we were there.
Yeah.
And then it was finished, and the conversation about camp was, and we were trying to get into more of a mundane topic, and he reaches over across in front of me, and he says, "And what else happened, Betty?" And I said, "Howard," and I told him what Spirit said.
Yeah.
He looked at me, and one tear. Now his kidneys had not been working for a long time. There was one tear that fell down on his cheek here.
Yeah.
And he said, "Betty, thank you. That's the most beautiful gift that I have ever received." When you were sent here to remind me to go to the light. And so he leaned back, and there was just peace in the room. And I didn't have to feel bad about it.
The peace was because you were relieved.
No, but I didn't. Just wasn't any. It was just peace.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sure that all of the Carmelite nuns who had
were
been
there.
working with him for so many months were relieved also.
Yeah.
And so he said, the most beautiful gift I've ever received. I think I'll go lie down. And like I said, it was so difficult for him to walk.
Move, yeah.
And he said, I said, "Please do." And he said, but you'll leave if I do. And I said, "I promise, Howard. Nora and I will be here when you get up. Please. We need a rest anyway."
Yeah.
So he went in and he lay down. And after a short time, he came back. And we said our goodbyes. And when we went home, and 2 days later, his wife called, and she said, "Betty, when you left, Howard asked me to call the Catholic priest." Howard had been raised Catholic in St. Louis, but he hadn't been in church that whole time. And so he says, "Would you call the priest, okay?" And so the priest came and talked to him, and when the priest left, he made transition into Spirit.
11 o'clock every Sunday at the corner of Country Club and Prince in Tucson. Reverend Betty Tatalajski.